Hello, BookTube. I had an appointment first thing early in the pre-dawn hours of Monday. Uh, but in the pre-dawn hours all night long, all of Monday, all of late Sunday into Monday night, the little bean had the trots. She had diarrhea. So it didn't really manifest itself until like 1 or 2 in the morning, when all of a sudden she came over to me. She had been sleeping peacefully. She came over to me and she was quivering with the effort of retaining herself. And she came over to me and asked rather urgently to go outside. And we went outside and she gushed. She, not the good way either. It was ugly and smelly. My heart went out to her, and then we came back inside, and she slept like a log. And 2 hours later, the same thing happened again. So we went out again at 4 in the morning, with pre-dawn mist everywhere, and everything just as quiet as a tomb. And she went again, and then it happened again at 6. It was a little bit less severe at 6. There was a little bit more security there, but even so, there was no way that I was going to leave her, so I had to cancel. I had to postpone that appointment. Otherwise, I would have gone to the Brattle bookshop in downtown Boston, a used bookstore that those of you who are new to the channel might not have heard me go on and on about it for years now. It's a used bookstore in the heart of Boston. It's incredible. It's an amazing place, and it would be amazing anyway, just for the huge turnover on the inside. But it also has a sale lot on the outside, thousands more books, not just one lorry full of books, but thousands of them, for $1, $3, and $5. And you can find all kinds of things out there. It's not junk. It's a whole bunch of stuff that's really good. But I didn't go to my bitterly early appointment. I didn't go because, Frida comes first, and I didn't want to leave her if she was feeling sick or was going to be sick. So I postponed it, hoping, as is usually the case, that a dog's digestive system is incredible. It's incredibly hardy, and hers bounced back right away. It was just something that she ate that didn't agree with her or whatever. So I went today, first thing, and then went to the Brattle, and it was wonderful. I had a wonderful time. Really picked up my spirits. And I got a bunch of books. I got a bunch of books that I want to show you. I got a few that were gifts, so they won't be in this pile, but I found a whole bunch of other interesting stuff that I want to show you. And we'll start off with something for the gays, because you have to give something to the gays on a regular basis. They don't need it all the time. They're not prima donnas, but you need something for the gays on a regular basis. And boy, oh boy, this is something, all right. I realized the other day, I went looking for this book for one particular quote, and I didn't find it. I suddenly realized, to my horror, that I didn't have a copy of it. I'd given my last one away. It's for good or ill, it is a classic of gay literature. It's Dancer from the Dance by Andrew Holleran. This is the original Plume paperback cover. It's had a few covers since then, but none that I think quite captures the era. These brushed photographs were also on the cover of Greg Stambulian's Men on Men gay fiction anthology set for a long time. Those original covers, boy oh boy, some of the stories in there, they're amazing. And in addition to the fact that you can look at the table of contents and wonder how many of the authors made it through the AIDS epidemic, Andrew Holleran did. And this book is it's amazing. It is. It's been too long since I actually sat down and read this, but I really should. I really should. It's raucous and raw. It's a book about gay love in the 1980s, in the really pre-plague Manhattan, but it's set in a broader context than that, because there's a large part of it that's epistolary, and a lot of the epistolary main characters aren't really in the scene anymore, but the scene is portrayed in a way that is memorable. It's extremely memorable, but it's been too long since I read it, and it is a kind of American classic, certainly American gay literature classic. So I just happened to find a copy. I just, when I go through my shelves like this and I see, oh boy, I can't believe it, I don't have a copy of that. First, I try to remember where I got rid of it, but I should stop doing that, because I can never remember. It's always that I've given it away to somebody, but I can never remember who, and why would I? What am I going to do? Email them and say, give it back? No. I have two reactions. First is a doomed attempt to try and remember where I sent it. And then the second reaction is just the Brattle will provide. Sooner or later, because the Brattle's overturn of stock is so enormous and is so ongoing, sooner or later I will find what I'm looking for there. So I just filed it away in the back of my head and thought, next time you see it, grab it. And I did. So that's great. Now, this next one was inspired by Twitter. I saw somebody posted on Twitter, I think it was a friend of mine in the publishing industry, posted a series of funny tweets about the Cary Grant movie, Mr. Blandings Builds His Dream House, which is, if you haven't seen it, it is a gem of a movie. It is a gem of a movie. And somebody on I think it was on Twitter, posted a series of wry comments about how impossible the whole idea is that anyone in advertising could buy a house in the countryside in Connecticut for the money that is paid by Mr. Blandings in that movie. The movie's incredibly charming. It was based on a book, and I found a copy of the book. I didn't find it with a dust jacket, but I found a copy of Mr. Blandings Builds His Dream House by Eric Hodson with illustrations by Will Steig. Let me get you. Yeah, see, there's these little funny. He was a New Yorker cartoonist, and these little funny spot illustrations run all throughout the book. He did a whole bunch of them, and this this is the story of a man who decides to commission the building of a house. It started out as an article. Mr. Blandings builds his castle. But the nightmare of it goes on from there. What it's like to renovate an old house. What it's like when you're at the prey of every two-bit opportunist who's trying to bilk you for as much money as they can. And this is just a battered hardcover with no dust jacket. I'll take it, definitely, because I think this was very cheap, like $1. So I will definitely take it, especially since those tweets on those posts on Twitter made me curious. They made me curious to reread it. I haven't read this thing in forever. The author, we can just assume, can we just assume for the purposes, to make it easy, for the purposes of this book haul, can we just assume that almost everybody on here has some connection to Harvard University? Let's just leave it at that. That almost everybody here, with a couple of exceptions, have some sort of connection to Harvard University. That makes it easier. This next one is one that doesn't. That doesn't at all. This is the great J.A. Froude. Was a controversial scholar, a great thinker, a great lecturer, great writer. His collected lectures, I believe, I've had at one point or another. I don't think I have anything by him anymore, except he did biographical studies of Henry VIII and the Tudors, and I have those in little paperbacks, but I don't think I have any of. I think there was a volume of his collected lectures and whatnot, a couple of which were on Erasmus, and I had them. I've had that volume at one point or another, but I don't at the moment. And this is his book on Julius Caesar, a sketch, which he famously says at the beginning. This is this has the onion skin paper and over a bust of Caesar, and this is, I think, from okay, this doesn't have a date on it, but this is from 100 years ago or more. And he writes in the preface to this book that he calls it a sketch because he doesn't think that a full dress biography is possible with the materials that we have. But boy, oh boy, is he good. I've had Caesar a sketch many times in my life because much as I don't like Julius Caesar, I have a small shelf of books about him. His biography is obviously pivotal, and a lot of first-rate biographers have been drawn to that story, including this. So I've had this many, many times, and there's a theme that runs through a couple of these books here. The last time I had a copy of this, it was an ex-library copy, so it didn't have this. This was obviously made for the market. The last time I had this, it was in an ex-library copy where the cover was just molded over in one cover, and someone had etched in all of this information. This is from the publisher, but that was uniform, made in uniform look for libraries 100 years ago, and I lost that copy in a fire. I had a fire. I left town. I left Boston for the first time in forever. I was brave enough to leave Boston for a brief vacation. I left my beagles in the care of the people I was living with, and I left the apartment. And I no sooner got to my destination in Washington than I was told that my apartment had burned. There had been a fire on the floor below, and that the building had been evacuated. And before it was evacuated, the fire department came, and they had no idea where the fire was. But so they blasted a stream of water through the front window of the front living room. And the back wall of that living room was my wall of biographies. My favorite kinds of books. It couldn't have been fiction. No. And so for the better part of an hour, water from a fire hose was hitting that wall. Just smashing into those books. And when that was all over and the fire was out, the firemen went through, pulled all that stuff down in case there were embers, in case anything was smoldering, piled it all in the middle of the room and doused it again. So when I got back, I came back the next day, found out that my beagles were fine. And I came back, I walked into my apartment, I rounded the corner to the living room, and I looked at just this mound of stuff. You could barely recognize that it had been books at all. It was the most heartbreaking thing in the world to see. And of course I had no inventory. I had no inventory of that wall. I'd often thought, for months, I'd thought, you know what you ought to do is take a picture of that wall. But I didn't do even that. So I had no idea what I'd lost, except that a couple of things really stuck out. And this was one of them. This was one of the books that I lost on that wall. Just was totally unsalvageable. A couple of the books on the edge of that pile were salvageable, but most of them weren't. And this is one of them. So I found it, and that's great. And I will reread a chunk of it. Then this next one is a novelist writing about another novelist. This is George Gissing writing about Charles Dickens. This is a critical life of Dickens. Rather, once upon a time, this was a rather nice hardcover. This hardcover is from 1904, but I believe the book came out like a half a decade earlier than that. And this is Dickens' study or Gissing's study of Dickens, and it shows you what history can do with the memory of an author. Because look what we have here. By George Gissing, author of The Year of the Jubilee. And what's the other one? Denzil Quarrier. Not New Grub Street, not The Odd Women, but books that no one remembers him for. And this is his grappling with Dickens. And I have never read it. I'm a fan of George Gissing, but I've never read this book. And I'm always haunted by the guilt of not getting along with Dickens as well as I know I should. I should get along with him, and I don't. I like almost any of his contemporaries better than I like him. And maybe this, I always look at books about Dickens in Love, Dickens in Hawk, Dickens at the Law, whatever it is. Or Peter Ackroyd's enormous biography, which I have in the other room. I always look at books like that and think, all right, maybe you'll be the one. Maybe you'll be the key that opens this lock for me. And wouldn't that be great? So we shall give it a try. It's almost always, I was going to say it's always a pleasure to read Gissing anyway, but it's not. It's not. When he's bad, he's really bad. But his thoughts on Dickens would be fun to read anyway. Then we have this next one. It's an old book, but it came in one of these Mylar jackets. So it's a lot of the things that I saw today did in one way or another. I don't think I got a lot of them, but I saw a lot of them. And this is, again, just assume the Harvard connection. Just assume it. This is John Markling, and this is Stopover Tokyo. But it is a Mr. Moto novel, as you can see. Isn't that lovely? Look at that lovely cover. That is just lovely. And this, Mr. Moto is these were, there was a void. When Charlie Chan novels stopped being published, there was a void. And a void needed to be filled with another vaguely oriental, vaguely intellectual figure. Mr. Moto is a very different figure, shadowy. We don't really know a lot about him, including whether or not that's his name. And usually the action in the Mr. Moto books doesn't really involve him. His relationship to the main narrative of the books that bear his name is one of the strangest that I know of in fiction. He's a guest star in his own books. And I don't know off the top of my head of any arrangement that's quite like that. And this thing came out, I think, in the late 1950s. When did you come out? 1956. This came out in 1956 and was the first Mr. Moto book in well over 10 years. So the publishing world looked at this thing and said, Mr. Moto is back. Fantastic. That's great. I don't know that there were any after this, but there were a few before this. This was the only one I saw. I don't know. I might have been weak enough to get them all if I'd seen more. But these were all dirt cheap. I mostly bought everything from the outside lot. I don't think I got anything inside today. And I haven't. I think I've read the first two Mr. Moto novels, but I don't think I've ever read this book. Certainly, I don't remember this cover at all. So I grabbed it. Absolutely, I grabbed it. It's March Mystery Madness after all. But even when March Mystery Madness is over, I'm still going to love murder mysteries. So I grabbed it. And then this next one also has a Mylar jacket. Very grateful about that. And unbelievably, this is also one of the books that was on that destroyed book wall. This is the one that I remembered. I didn't remember the Julius Caesar book until I saw it today. But this one I remembered right away and mourned it because I missed it. It's this. It's R.W. Chambers' biography of Thomas More. If I remember correctly, one of the only full-dress, soup-to-nuts biographies of anyone that he wrote. He wrote a whole lot of historical studies, but this is tremendous. It's boring looking, but it's tremendous. Just tremendous. The kind of old-world Oxbridge scholarship that America can almost never match. That almost nobody can ever match. And also a crisp reading experience. So I don't know. I remember this thing fairly well. I don't know if I'll get to it right away. Although I will be strongly tempted. As if you watched my mail haul today, you saw that somebody sent me the box trilogy of Hilary Mantel's Cromwell books. And Thomas More is extremely prominent in the first of those books, and in a very negative way. So we'll see. We'll see what the Saint has to say for himself here. I don't know if I'll get to this book right away, is what I'm saying. I think that's more for the biography shelf for when I next want to read about Thomas More. It's great to have it again. Just great. And then this next one comes in this room, which not a lot of these will. They'll go elsewhere. I don't think I'll be going through them anytime soon, but this one will come in this room onto this bookcase. Because this is Imaginary Homelands by Salman Rushdie in a hardcover, which is great. This is Granta Books. I don't know if this is a UK thing or not. What do we get? What is this? Oh. 1991, May 28th, 1991. Kindly send 2 copies of your review to the Viking Publicity Department. This is a review copy. This is a review copy that someone got sent. No mention here on the slip of the recipient. Oh, that just chaps my hide. This didn't go to me. I wasn't reviewing in 1991. I was happily selling books with Deb. But this is a collection of his occasional work, like these. Book prefaces, book reviews, book essays, Washington Post, New York Times Book Review, the New York Review of Books, the Wall Street Journal, that sort of thing. This is the stuff of his that fits that bill is all in here. So you have all sorts of contemporary authors, and also older authors in here. Who have we got? Oh, the review sheet is just mocking me. The reason, those of you who are very young or maybe don't know, the reason why I'd asked for 2 copies to be sent to the Viking Publicity Department is because there was no internet. So the only way Viking was going to know if you reviewed the book is if you told them. And you send 2 copies because they're going to be needed. If they want to excerpt your review and use it for a blurb, they're going to need multiple copies. Slips like that don't say anything like that anymore. Obviously they don't, because you don't have to send anything to publishers now. You don't even technically have to link them to anything. You just assume that they have Google searches set up for all of their current books. Who have we got here? Some historical essays, a piece on Kipling, of course, Anita Desai, a review of Attenborough's Gandhi movie. They're contemporary Western authors too, though. V.S. Naipaul, of course. But I thought he wrote a lot about other authors as well. About Nadine Gordimer, John Byrd, Graham Greene, John le Carré. There we go. Okay, Bruce Chatwin. A couple of pieces on Bruce Chatwin. Julian Barnes, Umberto Eco, Gunter Grass. Great. Okay. Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Mario Vargas Llosa, Maurice Sendak, Raymond Carver, Isaac Bashevis Simmer, Philip Roth, Saul Bellow, Thomas Pynchon, Kurt Vonnegut, Grace Paley. Great. Fantastic. I've had Imaginary Homelands before, but the last time I had it in a crappy trade paperback that just fell apart on me. Rushdie's worth revisiting. I don't know not 100% sure that the jury's out on whether or not he's a good person, but he's a hell of a writer. And naturally, as you would expect from me, I like this kind of his writing better than I like any of his fiction. And he's been conspicuously missing from this bookcase, so I was very happy to find this. And I will probably be tempted to reread quite a bit of what's in there, probably. And then the next one is a biography. In fact, the next three are biographies. The first one is one that I noticed was missing. I recently got Ronald Clark's biography of Albert Einstein, and I put it on the shelf next to a bunch of other just weathered biographies, older biographies of figures who've had more recent biographies. And I was looking at them and I was thinking, boy, the only thing that's missing is this book, Carlos Baker's book on Ernest Hemingway. Which is old now. This is from, what, 1970s? 1969. It's old now, and it was contested in its day. There is our author. It was contested in its day. Some of Hemingway's discarded wives and discarded mistresses had their issues with whether or not it was truthful to what they remembered. And famously, Baker got the job not only despite the fact that he never met Hemingway personally, but also because of the fact that he never met Hemingway personally. Hemingway didn't want someone who knew him to write a semi-authorized biography. And I have always, I don't know why, but I've always liked this biography better than any other subsequent Hemingway biography. I've read all of them, and I know that a lot of them are in a better position factually, maybe, or a more sanctioned position in terms of official documents and archives, but I've always liked this one more. I don't know why that is, but as far as literary lives go, an enjoyable experience of a literary life, I grabbed it. I couldn't believe it when I saw that it was there. It was a perfect example of the Brattle providing. Because the Brattle will do that. The outdoor sale lots are not organized in any way, and they're constantly refilled. So it's pure kismet out there. There are no rules. You can't impose any. But if you are looking at your shelves and you notice a lack, it could be that the Brattle will provide. I thought about that with this and with the next one. The next one, very much so, because just the other day, I did a 4K Q&A, not for 4,000 subscribers, but for 4,000 videos. I know, I have a problem. But one of the questions asked about this next book. And when I answered the question, I said, I love the book, but I bet I don't have a copy at the moment. I bet I gave it away. And I think I might have even said in that Q&A that the Brattle will provide. And it did in record time. JFK, Reckless Youth by Nigel Hamilton. This is a famous biography. It's meant to be the first volume in a trilogy. But the Kennedy family came down so hard on Nigel Hamilton for this because, as the New York Times put it, this is a zits and all portrait of JFK as a callow youth. And believe you me, there were scarcely any youths more callow than this youth. He didn't grow into statesman-like gravitas until 30 years after this book was, and the events covered in this book. When he was an undergraduate tobacco addict, oh my God, no. Then he wasn't anything like that. So, and that's what the point of this book is. The point of Nigel Hamilton's point in this book was not to mock the memory of JFK, and it wasn't to undermine the future man. It was to draw a portrait that isn't quite so sanctified of a very unsanctimonious youth. And it's a tremendous reading experience. That was the gist of the question, was, isn't this a great reading experience? It is. But that's kind of eerie even for the Brattle to provide so quickly and so on point that somebody mentions it to me and the next day I find it at the Brattle. You can't expect that. And then this next one comes from Ronald Clark's Einstein biography. When I was talking to you about Ronald Clark's Einstein biography, I mentioned that he wrote a really good one-volume standalone life of Benjamin Franklin. I thought about that when that video was over, and I walked around my biography section, as I do. And I noticed that not only did I not have Ronald Clark, but that I didn't have any one-volume biography of Benjamin Franklin. Instead, I have a couple of volumes of Franklin lived for 84 years on a couple of continents. He was involved in a whole lot of things: business, publishing, the creation of America, so diplomacy. So biographers tend to find it easier to write about him in segments. There was just recently, for instance, I reviewed for the Christian Science Monitor a book called Young Franklin, about his youth, his first 16 years in Boston. And that tends to be the way that people do it, and I tend to like that. And I have a couple of books in the other room on fragments of Franklin's life. You get thumbnails in those books of the rest of it, but they're mainly concentrating on one or two things. And I think they're tremendous. But I noticed when I was looking at my shelves that I didn't have Ronald Clark's book, and I didn't have any other one-volume book that just covered all of Franklin's life. So I grabbed this. which I don't, off the top of my head, really well remember. I think it's virtually impossible that I didn't read this. But I'm not, I might have to check my journal for the year in question. This is from the 1990s, I believe. 1986. I don't think I ever reviewed it, though. Well, anyway, this is by Esmond Wright, and it is Franklin of Philadelphia. Nice stately thing from the Belknap Press of Harvard University Press. I will read like the first 150 pages, see if it rings any bells. Maybe I never read this, but at least it's a nice, comprehensive Franklin biography, and even if it's only intermittently good, it'll be interesting. Franklin is endlessly interesting, and I'm always up for adding more biographies to the wall. And then the last one is a Byrd book. It's not a big biography. It's not anything else. It's just a Byrd book. This struck me as really neat. This is by William Byrd, and it's called Rare and Elusive Birds of North America. And there is one, and it's young, sticking its head out like that. I don't remember if I ever wrote about this thing. I'm going to have to check and see if I did. Actually, maybe the date will tell us right away. No, this came out in 2001. I never wrote about this. And that's probably why it seems so unusual to me. But I want to read you, just to finish this out, I want to read you something that I encountered. I wonder how easy it'll be for me to find it. I encountered a passage that struck me as far more eloquent than most of these books usually are. Who is William Byrd? Maybe that'll tell us. Author and photographer William Byrd has written for Automat and Smithsonian Magazine. Okay, that doesn't tell me anything. All right, well, I know that he's a good writer. Listen to this. This is about rails. There is a limit to the time you can spend under a Maryland sun walking back and forth in the infinitude of salt grass, poking about for a nest that might not be there. You can keep at it lucklessly just so long before interest wanders and sanity wanes. After about 3 hours, even the most fervent railophile loses heart. He's looking for a rail. That is a rail. Apparently they are elusive. The morning search was restricted to an area of manageable size, 2 acres maybe. It was a flat and tangled cordgrass in which calling had been dependable on recent nights, and the wonderful thing was that it was isolated, like an island. The surrounding landscape was recently burned over and covered, but scantily, with green, short blades, a situation utterly unsuitable for nests. If a nest lay hidden within a mile of those night calls, it was within these 2 tangled acres. Possibly it was confined for once. Twice I searched the area, probing thoroughly the tussled mixes of dead and living growth that seemed such perfect sites for nests. Willets scolded, and big blue-black horseflies made unrelenting circles that could not be ignored. A chat mocked from distant thickets. Net results of search: 2 nests for seaside sparrows, 1 of a red-winged blackbird. Black rails don't build nests, I concluded. They bear live young like certain snakes and fish. Or maybe they divide and multiply like single-cell amoebas. At night, of course. I imagine that's the kind of scouting frustration that is shared by quite a few birders. Maybe these things don't reproduce at all. But that gives me a lot of encouragement that the rest of this will be really enjoyable to read. I wonder how many of these birds I will ever have even come close to seeing. Maybe not any. Maybe it's dedicated birders who need to do this. Oh my God. Henslow sparrow, Van Buren County, Iowa. Oh my. All right, well, maybe I have seen some of them. All right, well, anyway, that is your Brattle Haul. Good Lord. So we have a Byrd book, Rare and Elusive Birds. We have Franklin of Philadelphia, one of a blast of biographies. We have JFK, Reckless Youth by Nigel Hamilton. No idea what happened to my copy, but I now have another one. We have Carlos Baker's biography of Ernest Hemingway. Old and maybe in some scholarly circles discredited, but my favorite. Then Imaginary Homelands by Salman Rushdie, his collection of occasional prose, deadline prose. Then Thomas More by R.W. Chambers, a terrific biography. Stopover Tokyo by John P. Marquand, a Mr. Moto novel, the first in quite some time. Charles Dickens by George Gissing, one novelist writing about another. Caesar, a sketch by Froude, another remnant of that lost biography wall. Mr. Blandings Builds His Dream House in a fairly crappy hardcover, but I'll take it. And finally, Dancer from the Dance by Andrew Holleran, a seminal gay fiction novel that, again, for good or ill, certainly bears rereading. It's been a while since I reread it. And there you go. That was a Brattle trip today. No idea when my next Brattle trip will be, but you'll be the first to know. So I'll wrap this up for now, but I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.